My husband bought me a dress for our anniversary. An hour later, he called me. "Well, how is it? Do you like it?" I answered, "Your sister took it for herself." Silence hung heavy on the line. Then he screamed, "What did you do, you idiot? Do you have any idea what's going to happen now?" Before this story picks up speed, let me tell you a little about myself. My name is Keisha Van. I had lived in that house for 2 years, and in that time, I learned to walk so the floorboards wouldn't creak, to speak so I wouldn't irritate my mother-in-law, and to breathe so no one would notice my presence. The estate, located in a wealthy suburb just outside of Atlanta, with its 2 stories, spacious veranda, and manicured garden, had once seemed like the gateway to a new life. But lately, it reminded me more and more of a prison with high-end renovations and expensive furniture, where I occupied the lowest rung of the unspoken family hierarchy. "Keisha, you forgot to wipe the cornices in the living room again." Eleanor Sterling's voice caught up with me in the kitchen, where I was finishing up the lunch dishes. "And the soup is too salty. Jasmine didn't even touch it." "I tasted it when I was cooking it. It seemed fine to me," I said. "It seemed to you." My mother-in-law pronounced the words with the same expression one uses to talk about something shameful. "That is exactly the problem. It seemed to you. Jasmine needs dietary food, and you season it like you're cooking for a construction crew." Eleanor was 58, and she wore her age with that specific posture common to women who have never known need. The family business, a chain of auto repair shops called Sterling Auto with 5 locations across the state, plus a car wash and tire center, brought in about $60,000 a month. By my estimates, the family's total fortune was no less than $5 or $6 million, and every dollar of that money seemed to add to my mother-in-law's confidence in her own righteousness. I wiped my hands on a towel and stayed silent. In 2 years, I had learned the main rule of this house. Arguing with Eleanor was like spitting into the wind. I cooked poorly. I didn't clean thoroughly enough. I breathed too loudly. Whatever I did, it turned out to be wrong, not enough, or at the wrong time. In the living room, on the sofa by the window, sat Jasmine, Eleanor's 27-year-old daughter, and Marcus's younger sister. Pale, with long dark hair scattered over her shoulders, she was flipping through a magazine. The sunlight falling from the window made her skin look almost transparent. "Glass girl," her mother called her. And there wasn't a drop of exaggeration in that nickname. Jasmine suffered from a rare form of allergy to synthetic fabrics. Any contact with the wrong material caused her rashes, shortness of breath, and in severe cases, convulsions and loss of consciousness. Therefore, all her clothes, bed linens, and even towels were custom-made from natural silk by private seamstresses or ordered directly from overseas for $2,000, maybe even $3,000 a dress. Jasmine's room on the second floor was always locked, and I wasn't allowed in under any pretext. Eleanor explained in my first month that it was to prevent me from bringing in anything harmful to Jasmine on my clothes. So I had no idea what was happening behind that door, or what kind of life my sister-in-law lived in her isolated little world. "Jasmine, honey, should I bring you some tea?" Eleanor had already softened, turning to her daughter. Her voice sounded completely different, softer, warmer, with that special intonation I never heard directed at me. "Or maybe some cocoa? I bought that Belgian kind you like." "Tea, Mama, thank you. With lemon or honey, like yesterday?" "With honey, I think." They spoke in their own special language, inaccessible to outsiders, and I had long stopped taking offense at it. I simply accepted it as a given. In this house, I was service staff, not a family member. Everything revolved around Jasmine, with her special food, special attention, and custom-tailored clothes made from expensive fabrics. That evening, when Marcus returned from work, I tried to tell him about the clash with his mother. My husband, a tall, broad-shouldered man of 34, with kind brown eyes and a soft smile, listened to me while sitting on the edge of the bed. Then he took my hand and stroked my wrist with that familiar, soothing gesture I knew by heart. "Mom is just worried about Jasmine. You know how hard it is for her with this illness. Be patient a little longer, okay? For me." Marcus, I've been patient for 2 years. Every day, every hour. I know, baby. I know. But what can I do? She's my mother. She's devoted her whole life to Jasmine, to her treatment, to her care. You can't expect her to suddenly change. He pulled me close, hugged me, and I buried my face in his shoulder, inhaling the familiar scents of cologne, soap, and a faint hint of motor oil that he could never quite scrub off after visiting one of the shops. Marcus was like a soft blanket to me. You could hide under it from the cold, warm up for a while, but it wouldn't protect you from an icy wind. He was capable of comforting me, but he would never take my side against his mother. And I had long resigned myself to this, convincing myself that his love, even if not all-powerful, was still genuine. When I met him 3 years ago, I was working as a sales associate at a mall in downtown Atlanta and renting a room in a shared apartment on the outskirts of the city. Tiny, with a sagging mattress and a window facing dumpsters. An orphan who grew up in the foster system, without a degree, without a career, without a single relative in the whole wide world, I was used to relying only on myself. The appearance of Marcus in my life seemed like a miracle, a fairy tale that only happens in movies. He took me out of that room, brought me to this big house, and promised happiness. The first months really were happy, full of tenderness, plans, and hope. But then the routine set in, and the fairy tale gradually turned into something else entirely. I couldn't leave. I had nowhere to go. There was nothing waiting for me outside the walls of this house except the streets. The morning of our second wedding anniversary turned out sunny, with a light breeze rustling the curtains on the open bedroom window. Marcus had driven to the city the day before. Negotiations with parts suppliers were dragging into a second day. I woke up alone in our room on the second floor, in a wide bed that felt too empty without my husband. Outside the window, the trees rustled, and somewhere in the distance, a neighbor's dog barked. It was an ordinary summer day that foreshadowed nothing special. The courier from FedEx arrived around noon, a young guy in a uniform jacket who asked me to sign the tablet screen and wished me a good day. I took the box, firm, weighty, tied with a champagne-colored satin ribbon, and went up to my room, feeling excitement growing in my chest. Inside, layered in tissue paper, lay a dress, natural silk, emerald green, shimmering in the light like the wing of an exotic bird. The price tag read $2,500. My fingers wouldn't obey as I lifted it out of the box, unfolding the paper layer by layer. It was that same silk, real, expensive, the same kind Jasmine's clothes were made from. For the first time in 2 years, my husband had given me something equal, something truly beautiful, something that said, "You are important too. You deserve the best too." Maybe I do mean something to him after all, I whispered to my reflection in the mirror, and my lips stretched into a smile on their own. The dress fit perfectly, accentuating my waist and softly flowing over my hips. I turned this way and that in front of the mirror, admiring how the silk caught the light, how the emerald color popped against my deep complexion. For a second, I forgot about everything. About my mother-in-law, about the endless nitpicking, about my humiliated position in this house. I imagined how Marcus and I would go to a nice restaurant in downtown Atlanta, how he would look at me all evening, how my friends, if I had friends, would die of envy. How beautiful. Jasmine's voice behind me made me start and turn around. My sister-in-law was standing in the doorway. Absorbed in my reflection, I hadn't heard her steps in the hallway. She was looking at the dress with a strange, almost hungry gaze, not taking her eyes off the shimmering fabric. She walked closer, moving with her usual fluid gait, and with trembling fingers, she touched the fabric on my sleeve, stroking it. "Marcus gave this to me," I said, instinctively stepping back half a step. "For our anniversary." "Beautiful color, very beautiful. Jasmine, this is my gift. What is going on here?" Eleanor appeared right behind her daughter, her eyes instantly locked onto the silk, sharp and assessing, the way one looks at a jewelry display. I saw a whole range of emotions flash across my mother-in-law's face: surprise, A quick calculation of the cost, a decision. She apparently accepted the emerald shade as safe, not that forbidden jade green that was never spoken of aloud, but was somehow under an unspoken ban. "Jasmine, honey, if you like it, wear it in good health." Eleanor stepped forward and with one confident movement pulled the dress off my shoulder, ignoring my attempt to hold onto the fabric. "Keisha's closet is bursting as it is. This is my gift." My voice broke into a scream I didn't expect from myself. "Marcus gave it to me for our anniversary. It's mine now. Don't yell." The mother-in-law didn't even turn around as she handed the dress to her daughter. "The neighbors will hear. It's disgraceful. Marcus will understand. He always understands that Jasmine needs it more." "Mama, maybe we shouldn't?" Jasmine started, and something like doubt sounded in her voice. "Wear it, Jasmine, wear it. It suits you. This color matches your eyes." I stood in the middle of the room in my underwear, hugging myself with my arms, watching as Jasmine, with a guilty expression on her pale face, eyes lowered but still took the emerald silk to her room. Cold rolled through my body from my throat to my stomach and froze there as a heavy lump that wouldn't let me breathe. That evening, I couldn't eat. A piece of food wouldn't go down my throat. I sat in the bedroom on the edge of the bed, looking at the empty dress box, at the satin ribbon that now seemed like a mockery, and waited for my husband's call. He called around 9. His voice was unusually warm, almost playful, full of anticipation. "Well, did you get it, Sunshine? Did you like it? I specially ordered the same silk they use for Jasmine. I wanted you to have something special too." Jasmine saw it and took it. I couldn't hold back the tears that had been accumulating all day. "Your mother told her to take it. She just pulled it off me and gave it to her." A pause. 3 seconds. 4. I heard only his breathing in the receiver, first calm, then sharp, ragged. "What did you do, you idiot? Do you have any idea what's going to happen now?" The phone slipped from my fingers and fell onto the bed. I stared at the screen where my husband's name was glowing, and I didn't recognize the voice that continued to scream something from the speaker, incoherent, furious, terrifying. This wasn't Marcus, not the kind, soft man who comforted me after fights with his mother, who stroked my hand and said, "Be patient, Sunshine." This was the roar of a beast cornered, in which sounded not anger, but terror. He covered the 3-hour drive on the interstate in less than 2. I later calculated what speed he must have been driving to make it that fast. I heard the front door slam downstairs, footsteps thundering up the stairs, heavy, hurried, stumbling. Marcus flew past me with his shirt unbuttoned and his tie skewed to the side. There was a wild, inhuman glint in his eyes. Without even looking, he shoved me out of the way and rushed to his sister's room. Eleanor's scream tore through the silence of the house, protracted, terrible, the kind one makes only from unbearable pain or unbearable fear. I went up to the second floor and stopped in the doorway of Jasmine's room, that very room where I was never allowed. What I saw did not fit in my head. It defied explanation. My sister-in-law was writhing on the floor in convulsions, her head thrown back. Her eyes had rolled back so far that only the whites were visible. Foam was coming from her mouth. Nearby, crumpled and thrown on the floor, lay the emerald dress. "This is all because of you." Eleanor turned to me, and her face was twisted with such hatred as I had never seen before. "You snake! You brought this filth into the house yourself with your own hands!" "I didn't. It's just fabric." I stepped back, my back hitting the door frame, not understanding, not having time to understand the connection between a silk dress and what was happening on the floor. "Just fabric? Get out of here! Get out!" Marcus picked his sister up in his arms. She seemed weightless, like a rag doll, with limply hanging arms and a thrown-back head. He carried her to the stairs. Passing his wife, he stopped for a second, and I looked into his eyes, searching for anything familiar, even a shadow of yesterday's tenderness. But there was only something cold, alien, frightening, the look of a man looking at an enemy. "Get out of my sight." They left for the hospital in the city. I heard the engine roar, tires screeching on the turn, and I remained alone in the huge empty house, clutching the cursed dress that someone had thrown at my chest. The last evidence that this nightmare day was real at all. Jasmine was brought back 2 days later, pale, gaunt, strangely silent. She sat in the corner of her room, pulling her knees to her chest, with a vacant gaze fixed on the wall, reacting neither to voices nor touch. Eleanor completely took over her daughter's care, moved into her room, slept there on a cot, and for me, a real hell began. "Don't sit at the common table," my mother-in-law threw at me the very first morning when I came down for breakfast. "Eat in the kitchen, in the corner." "But why?" "I said in the kitchen, and I don't want to see you at the table ever again." Marcus was silent. He moved into his home office behind a locked door, slept there on the sofa, and to all my attempts to talk, to reach out, to explain, to understand what was happening, he answered the same way, without opening the door. "You don't need to know this. Do what you're told and stay out of it." Days turned into an endless series of humiliations, merging into one gray, hopeless mass. I did laundry, cooked, scrubbed floors, weeded the garden beds, cleaned the toilets, and all this under a continuous stream of venomous remarks from my mother-in-law, each of which entered me like an invisible needle. "This is what happens when you take a stray into the house," Eleanor would say, addressing no one, but loud enough so I heard every word, absorbed every syllable. Nothing but trouble from the likes of her. No family, no upbringing, no conscience. I lost weight. Skirts started hanging on my hips. Shirts hung like sacks. Shadows lay under my eyes that didn't go away even after the rare nights I managed to sleep. One day, walking past the mirror in the hallway, I didn't immediately recognize the woman looking back at me. Exhausted, with a dull gaze, sunken cheeks, someone from whom something important had been removed, something that made her alive. I couldn't leave. There was nowhere to go. The foster system had long forgotten me. I had no friends left. Eleanor had methodically cut off all contacts, all connections with the outside world over 2 years. There was no money at all. Marcus had taken my debit card in the first year of our marriage, explaining it as a joint family budget, and that it was simpler to manage the household that way. I was trapped, without money, without documents, without a single person in the whole world who could lend me a hand. At the end of the second week, standing at the sink with another mountain of dishes, elbow deep in soapy water, I caught myself realizing that my hands were no longer shaking. Something inside me had changed. It hadn't broken completely, as I had feared, but on the contrary, it had hardened, turned into a rod of steel, a support. I remembered my husband's scream in the phone receiver, that primal terror in his voice. "What have you done?" I remembered his crazy eyes when he rushed to his sister's room, pushing everyone out of his way. I remembered the coldness in his gaze when he carried Jasmine in his arms. There was too much strange about all this, too strong a reaction to an ordinary dress, too much fear where there should have been only irritation. The plate in my hands reflected the light from the window, and I looked at my distorted reflection in the wet ceramic glaze, blurred, unrecognizable, alien. Enough. Stop being a puppet in someone else's nightmare. Stop drifting with the current. Stop tolerating and remaining silent. It was time to find out what was actually happening in this house and why an ordinary silk dress had turned my life into ruins. The decision didn't mature immediately. It ripened gradually, like an abscess that sooner or later must burst. I continued to do the housework, continued to endure humiliation, but now my eyes looked differently. I observed, remembered, put scattered details into a general picture, the contours of which remained blurry for now. The first oddity was discovered a few days later when I was dusting on the second floor. Eleanor, thinking her daughter-in-law was busy downstairs, stealthily walked down the corridor with a small black bag in her hands, looking around with the tense expression of a person carrying something forbidden. She disappeared into Jasmine's room and came out a minute later without the bag, locking the door behind her. But this time, the lock didn't click all the way. Either my mother-in-law was in a hurry, or she simply didn't notice. I waited until the footsteps died down on the stairs and carefully pushed the door, which hadn't opened before me once in 2 years. What I saw made me freeze on the threshold with a rag in my hand. Jasmine's room turned out to be not a sick girl's bedroom, but something between a hospital ward and a prison cell. On the windows were thin metal bars, painted the color of the walls, almost invisible at first glance, but undoubtedly strong. The bed was iron, medical grade, with rails on both sides like they put in psychiatric wards. Jasmine slept on it, pale with blue lips, in a curled-up pose. On the table was a stack of books, and stepping closer, I read the spines with amazement. Textbooks for the 9th and 10th grades, although Jasmine was 27. Why did a grown woman need bars on the windows? Why this hospital bed? Why did the mother-in-law carry something to her secretly, hiding from everyone? I left the room, carefully closing the door, and from that day on, I began a systematic observation of the house, pretending to be resigned and broken. Every day at exactly 5 in the evening, Eleanor prepared a special infusion for Jasmine. Herbal, as she said, but the smell from it wasn't herbal, but acrid, medicinal, chemical. After this tea, Jasmine would fall into a deep, unnatural sleep until morning without dinner, from which it was impossible to wake her. At night I heard Marcus tossing and turning in his office behind the wall, muttering something incoherent, sighing, sometimes crying out. One day, pressing my ear to the door, I made out the words, "It's not your fault, Jazz. Forgive me. Forgive me." Forgive him for what? The opportunity to penetrate Jasmine's room properly presented itself 2 weeks later. Eleanor went to visit distant relatives for a funeral in Macon, and Marcus was staying late at work. In the storage room behind the door, among old tools and forgotten things, I found a bunch of keys belonging to my late father-in-law, the one who died of a heart attack 5 years ago. And one of the keys, heavy with a darkened brass head, fit the lock. In Jasmine's closet hung only monotonous pajamas of faded colors, gray, beige, washed-out blue. Not a single bright item. In the drawers were empty notebooks without a single entry, without a single personal word. And under the bed, in the farthest corner, I felt an old wooden box with a brass latch. I opened the lid, trying to calm my excitement. Inside lay strange things: a rag doll with a torn arm, a butterfly hair clip with a broken wing, yellowed photographs of an unfamiliar smiling girl, young, beautiful, with lively, cheerful eyes, and a stack of neatly cut newspaper articles that made my insides go cold. State University student killed under wheels of car. Read a headline from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution from 12 years ago. Tragedy on the old highway. 19-year-old cyclist died on the spot. Victim Maya Thorne, sophomore at the College of Education. Driver not identified, case closed. I photographed everything on my phone, hid the box back, and left the room, feeling questions piling up in my head without answers. What was the connection between Jasmine's illness and the death of an unfamiliar girl 12 years ago? Why did my sister-in-law keep these clippings, these things? That very evening, as I sat in the kitchen trying to comprehend what I had seen, the home phone rang. I picked up the receiver and heard a male voice, hoarse, with metallic notes. "Don't go where you shouldn't. You have to pay for old sins, and not just those who committed them." "Who is this?" I asked. But there were already dial tones in the receiver. The word sins stuck in my head like a splinter. This wasn't a casual threat. It was a warning from someone who knew something important. Someone outside the family knew the secret. I chose the moment to talk to Marcus 3 days later, when Eleanor went to Macon again. My husband was sitting in the living room with a glass of cognac, and I silently placed my phone with the photos of the newspaper articles in front of him. "What is this?" He turned pale, set aside the glass, and clutched his head. "Where did you get this? Tell me the truth, Marcus, the whole truth." A long silence, then words poured out of him like pus from a lanced boil. 12 years ago, 15-year-old Jasmine secretly took their father's SUV and, on a rainy June evening, hit a cyclist on the old highway. Maya Thorne was returning from a friend's graduation party in a neighboring town. She was wearing a fancy emerald dress. A sudden downpour started. She decided to ride her bike quickly and died on the spot. Jasmine was a minor, Marcus said dully, not looking at me. Parents were scared for her psyche. They paid the victim's family $8 million, plus an apartment in the city, bribed the investigator and the prosecutor. The case was closed. And the curse? I asked. What does the color of the dress have to do with it? Marcus shuddered, rubbed his face with his palms, and continued. Maya's mother, driven mad with grief, came to the gates of our house and screamed that her daughter was in an emerald dress, and now that color would haunt the killer until the end of her days. The family didn't believe it at first, but one day a relative gave Jasmine a green robe, and that night the girl started having convulsions. She screamed that she saw a bloodied Maya in the corner of the room. Since then, the color emerald has been strictly forbidden in the house. I listened, and something didn't add up in this story. If it was just psychological trauma, why the bars on the windows? Why the secret tea with the chemical smell? Why did the stranger on the phone speak of sins as if talking about something legal? Marcus? I looked my husband straight in the eyes. If you knew this color was forbidden, why did you buy an emerald dress and send it to me as an anniversary gift? He flinched, looked away, and started mumbling something incoherent. His silence turned out to be more eloquent than any words. I understood. He used me as a test subject. 12 years later, he wanted to check if the curse was still active, if Jasmine's reaction would remain. If his sister didn't react, they could loosen control, live more normally. The scream, "What have you done?" wasn't fear for his sister's life, but panic because a cruel experiment had yielded too good a result. I drove to the State University campus a week later, choosing a day when Marcus was at work and Eleanor was busy with Jasmine. At the archives, they refused me personal data. We don't have the right. In despair, I sank onto a bench near the main building, not knowing what to do next. "You're from the Sterling family, right?" A gray-haired man sat down next to me, and I immediately recognized that voice, hoarse with metallic notes. "Was it you who called?" "I am Alexander Thorne, Maya's father." He told me that for 12 years he had been conducting his own investigation, watching the Sterling family. An old acquaintance, a security guard at the university, told him that some woman was asking about his daughter in the archives. 12 years, he said quietly. 4,380 days. Not a single day has passed that I haven't thought about her and who killed her. "Jasmine," I said. "My husband told me. She was 15. She took her father's car." "No, that's a lie. Jasmine wasn't driving." Mr. Thorne looked me straight in the eyes. "Your husband, Marcus, was driving." I felt the ground disappear from under my feet. Mr. Thorne spoke slowly, weighing every word. That day, both of them were in the car, 22-year-old Marcus and 15-year-old Jasmine. They were returning from the city where they had been on business for their father. An argument broke out in the car. Marcus demanded money from his parents for his own business. His father refused. In a rage, he hit the gas and raced the car through the pouring rain on the slippery highway. He hit my daughter. Mr. Thorne's voice didn't tremble, but in it sounded pain that no amount of years could dull. And then they made the decision to pin everything on the minor sister. She was 15. Criminal liability starts at 16. The parents agreed to protect the son, the heir. But Jasmine, she believes she's guilty. 12 years, Mr. Thorne repeated. For 12 years, they've been instilling in her that she is a killer. That herbal tea they give her every day isn't a sedative. It's neuroleptics that cause memory loss and confusion. They turned a healthy girl into a psychiatric patient so she would never remember the truth and tell anyone. I sat motionless, and the world around me was rebuilding itself like a puzzle in which all the pieces had finally fallen into place. The allergy to fabrics was a fabrication to isolate Jasmine from the outside world, so no outsider could talk to her. The bars on the windows weren't for protection, but so she wouldn't run away and tell someone the truth she no longer remembered herself. The emerald dress wasn't a dead girl's curse, but a trigger for an artificially created trauma that the family had maintained and fed all these 12 years to keep Jasmine in a state of eternal guilt and eternal fear. Mr. Thorne spoke for a long time about how, after the accident, the family convinced the shocked 15-year-old girl that she was driving. How they repeated to her, over and over, "You sat behind the wheel, you hit her. It's your fault." Until these words were eaten into her consciousness permanently. Shock, false guilt, high doses of drugs, all this gradually destroyed her memory and will, turning a living person into an obedient doll. The statute of limitations for the accident expired long ago, Mr. Thorne said, when we had already gotten up from the bench and were walking slowly along the university alley. But false imprisonment is a continuing crime. It has been going on all these years. And intentional poisoning with neuroleptics is grievous bodily harm. The statute of limitations hasn't run out on these charges. A case can be opened. What needs to be done? Evidence. A sample of that tea they give her. Testimony from Jasmine herself when she comes to her senses. And your readiness to go to the end. I nodded, feeling not anger, not a desire for revenge rising inside me, but a clear understanding of what had to be done. I returned to the house under the pretext of reconciliation, submissive, broken, ready to continue playing the role of servant. Eleanor accepted this as due, not even hiding a triumphant smirk. "Finally wised up," she threw out when I silently picked up the mop. "You should have done that long ago. Know your place, and everyone will be calmer." I nodded, agreed, followed instructions, and watched. 3 days later, I managed to take a sample of the dregs from the teapot that my mother-in-law hadn't managed to wash after another herbal infusion for Jasmine. I handed the container to Mr. Thorne at the agreed place, at the bus stop at the entrance to our subdivision. The analysis results from a private lab came in a week. Powerful psychotropic drugs which, with prolonged use, cause memory loss, confusion, and persistent dependence. "Now we need to talk to her," Mr. Thorne said over the phone. "So doubt. Without her testimony, the case will fall apart." Getting into Jasmine's room proved more difficult than I thought. The door was now locked from the inside with a deadbolt, and Eleanor wore the key around her neck. But the window of Marcus's office opened onto an adjacent balcony. And one night, when my husband went to Savannah for negotiations and Eleanor fell asleep in front of the TV, I climbed over the railing and found myself at the glass door of Jasmine's room. My sister-in-law was sitting on the bed, staring at the wall with empty eyes. Seeing me, she huddled into the corner, pressing her knees to her chest. "Go away!" Her voice broke into a squeal. "I see her. She's here, all in blood. Jasmine, listen to me." I spoke quietly, not moving from my spot. "Do you remember the doll? The rag one with the torn arm and the butterfly clip with the broken wing?" The girl froze, and something alive, a spark of recognition flashed in her eyes. "How do you know?" "I found your hiding place, and the newspaper clippings too. Jasmine, listen to me carefully. You are innocent. You didn't kill anyone. They've been lying to you for 12 years. "No!" Jasmine grabbed her head, rocking from side to side. My head is splitting. Go away!" I wanted to say something else, but I heard footsteps on the stairs and barely managed to climb back onto the office balcony. My pulse pounded in my temples so loud it seemed audible throughout the house. But the main thing was done. I saw a tear roll down Jasmine's cheek. Somewhere deep inside, the girl was still alive. The climax came 4 days later. Unexpectedly, unpredicted, as usually happens with things that have ripened for years. Marcus returned home drunk. He had been drinking with partners at the auto shop, celebrating some deal, and collapsing into an armchair in the living room, he suddenly started crying. I froze in the kitchen doorway, not believing my eyes. A grown man was sobbing like a child, smearing tears over his face. "I can't live like this anymore, Mom," he muttered when Eleanor ran up to him. "I can't. I failed her, and I failed Jazz. It's all me, All my fault." "Shut up!" Eleanor covered his mouth with her hand, glancing back at me. "Shut up immediately!" But it was too late. Upstairs, a door creaked, and Jasmine appeared on the stairs, pale, disheveled, with eyes widened in horror. "What? What did you say?" Her voice was quiet, but in the silence of the house, it sounded deafening. "Marcus? What did you say?" "Jasmine, honey, go to your room." Eleanor rushed to her daughter. "You mustn't get agitated. You know, it's all my fault." Marcus raised his head, and in his eyes stood such anguish that for a second I felt sorry for him. "Jazz, forgive me. Forgive me. You are not guilty of anything." Jasmine's scream tore the air, inhuman, wild, full of pain accumulated over years, which had finally found an exit. She swayed on the top step, grabbed the railing, and began to slump. I rushed to her, managing to catch her limp body before it tumbled down the stairs. Jasmine was taken to the hospital in the city by ambulance. I went with them, sitting in the waiting room all night while doctors stabilized the patient's condition. Marcus and Eleanor arrived home toward morning, rumpled, with dark circles under their eyes, leaving me to keep watch by the ward. This was my chance. Mr. Thorne was waiting at the service exit in an old car with the engine running. I led Jasmine out. She moved like a sleepwalker, not resisting, not asking questions. I had already opened the back door when footsteps sounded behind us. "Stop!" Marcus stood on the porch without a jacket, in a wrinkled shirt, with the face of a man who hadn't slept for several days. He looked aged by a decade in one night. "Marcus, don't interfere." I stood between him and the car. "I'm taking her." A long pause. Marcus looked at his sister, who sat in the back seat with a vacant stare. Then he shifted his eyes to his wife, his ex-wife, as he already understood. "Take her." His voice was hoarse, gone. "Take care of her. It's at least something I can do for her." He took a gym bag off his shoulder and held it out to me. $50,000 in cash, for treatment, for living expenses. I couldn't gather more in time. "You think this changes anything?" "No." He shook his head. "It changes nothing. But I want at least someone to walk out of this story alive." He turned and walked back toward the hospital, hunching under the weight of an invisible burden. I watched him go, not knowing what to feel, relief or disgust. Then I got into the car next to Jasmine. "Let's go," I said to Mr. Thorne, to a private clinic for neuroses in Buckhead. The treatment took more than a year. Doctors diagnosed severe drug dependency and post-traumatic stress disorder, artificially created and maintained for many years. The first weeks were the hardest. Jasmine almost didn't speak, hid in the corner of the room, flinched at every sound. But gradually, under the influence of therapy and the cessation of neuroleptics, she began to thaw. I visited every weekend, read books to her, told stories, just sat silently nearby, holding her hand. Meanwhile, the authorities opened a case on a combination of charges: false imprisonment, intentional infliction of grievous bodily harm, giving false testimony. Everyone involved was called in for questioning. The confrontation in the investigator's office became the final test for Jasmine. Eleanor sobbed, wringing her hands. "I just wanted to protect my son. He was the hope of the family, the heir, the successor to the business. And Jasmine, she would have survived. She is strong." I was a coward. Marcus sat with his head down, not raising his eyes. "I destroyed everyone's lives. Maya's, Jasmine's, Keisha's. I am ready to accept punishment." The investigator turned to Jasmine. "Ms. Sterling, do you have anything to add?" A long silence. Jasmine looked at her mother and brother, people whom for 12 years she had considered a loving family, and in her eyes there was neither fear nor hatred, only bottomless pain and misunderstanding. "Why?" she uttered finally. And this short word contained everything: years of lies, stolen youth, a destroyed life. Eleanor rushed to her daughter, reaching out her hands, begging for forgiveness. But Jasmine silently stood up, took my hand, and walked out of the office. The door closed behind us, leaving behind two people immersed in belated repentance. A year and a half later, I stood in front of my small flower shop, Sunflower, in the quiet, historic town of Madison. 40 minutes from the chaos, a different world, a different life. Marcus was by that time already serving a term in a medium security prison, 5 years for false imprisonment and intentional infliction of grievous bodily harm. The statute of limitations for the accident itself had expired, but that didn't save him. Eleanor received 4 years of probation. The court took into account her age and health condition. She sold the estate for next to nothing and moved to a rural town. A lonely, broken old woman whom neighbors bypassed. The divorce went quietly, without scandal, just an application and a certificate a month later. Jasmine was recovering slowly but surely. First, she began speaking in full sentences, then started going out for walks, then got interested in painting. One day, she showed me a watercolor painting where two female figures, holding hands, walked across a field toward the rising sun. At the bottom, in shaky handwriting, was written, "Thank you for pulling me out." Mr. Thorne, having achieved justice for his daughter 12 years later, finally found peace. He was able to visit Maya's grave and say aloud, "I did everything I could, baby girl." Now he often visited me and Jasmine, brought vegetables from his garden, helped around the house, fixed things that broke in our old cottage. 3 people who had gone through hell became a family to each other, that genuine family that none of them had had before. I sometimes remembered that emerald dress, the fatal gift that pushed me into the abyss but simultaneously opened the road to the truth. I lost a husband and illusions, but I gained something greater, freedom, truth, and a sister whom I will love and protect until the end of my life. The sunflowers in the shop window stubbornly reached for the light, and looking at them, I smiled that forgotten smile that doesn't come from the lips, but from somewhere deep inside. The storm had passed, and after it, the sky always becomes clearer. If you liked my story and want to hear more, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. If you'd like to support me, you can do it through Super Thanks. It would mean a lot. In the comments, tell me which city you're watching from and what time it is so I can see how far my story reaches. I've added 2 more life stories on the screen just for you. Click one now and let's keep spending time together. Much love. See you soon.